Hi, you're listening to Burn Beautiful, a podcast for women ready to step into their divine feminine leadership so they can create a life of joy, health, and impact beyond their wildest dreams. Here, you'll learn how to heal stress from the inside out, reclaim your vibrant health, and master your energy so you can lead powerfully without burning out and actually enjoy the moments that matter most in this one beautiful and precious life. I'm Nicole Whitaker, burnout and leadership coach, founder of Lead Up Health, and creator of the HERS method. Welcome. Welcome back to Burn Beautiful. I am thrilled to have you here today. Welcome, because today I have an important conversation for you about perfectionism. That is that voice inside that says you have to do it flawlessly, or look flawless, or be flawless, or else you're not enough, or you have failed, or they're not going to think you are qualified or worthy. Perfectionism is one of the biggest blockers to real success and also happiness for women, especially those in leadership, because it can keep you stuck in a stress loop of self-doubt, of comparing to others, and then over-functioning. And these things they steal time and energy away from things like having fun and enjoying life, or from focusing on what is actually most important to accelerate your career, or from aligning your time with your values. And the question for most of us isn't if we have perfectionistic tendencies. The vast majority of us do. The real questions are to what extent, in what areas of life and work, and how is it impacting our lives? Because these patterns are so ingrained, we often don't even realize that they're running the show. And while I'll talk through the leadership lens today, perfectionism, if you experience it, it's going to show up everywhere. So, for example, it really started to rear its head for myself when I became a parent, thinking, oh my gosh, I have to parent and do everything perfectly, or else my kids will have, small t trauma. And that turned into things like controlling even how I wanted my husband to parent. So he would do it the quote unquote right way. And so, as you can see, this doesn't just lead to burnout, right? That's exhausting and also impossible. But on top of a high pressure job, it also is impacting relationships, teamwork, and then everybody's well being. But here's the interesting part. When we end up in chronic stress because of hidden patterns like perfectionism, we usually initially, myself included, try to blame something external. We think, oh, it's my job. Things are going to get so much better after this project is over. Or even, once my kids are older. But the job changes, the kids grow, and we are still stressed and burned out. So this happened to me when I left my old job to start my own business. I was like, freedom, right? I'm finally free. But within months, I noticed myself falling into some of those perfectionistic habits, like looking at a project on my phone when I should have been present with my kids, or rehashing, ooh, how did I say that correctly in the email? And the good news is that because I'm familiar with these patterns, I was able to catch myself and pull myself out of that relatively quickly. And when we heal perfectionism, we find real relief, right? We move from burnout to energy, from self-criticism to self-compassion, from trying always to prove ourselves to just being present. And our teams then also move from pressure to safety, from confusion to clarity, and from dependence on you as a leader to really feeling empowered to utilize their strengths and their gifts. So by the end of today, we will explore the hidden obstacle of perfectionism, why it shows up for women, how it might be showing up for you specifically, and then the surprising antidotes that heal perfectionism and shift you towards greater excellence and joy in your leadership and your life. And I'm actually going to start by talking a bit about why perfectionism and people pleasing show up so strongly for women. Because the more we understand the roots and where these things come from, the more we're going to have that compassion that we need for ourselves and for others. And that's when real healing takes place, right? We're not trying to fix ourselves. We're not trying to fix perfectionism. We want to heal. And so for that to happen, we need to understand it so we can offer ourselves some compassion around it. So as you listen today, I invite you to ask yourself, what are my beliefs about how to go about achieving success? And where did those beliefs come from? So, again, what are my beliefs about how to achieve success? And where did those beliefs come from? And right now, we're going to look at two big forces that shape, for many of us, those beliefs, and that is social context and representation in the workforce. So let's look at the bigger picture. Historically, success has been modeled on what we might call masculine energy, okay? Things like structure, competition, climbing a vertical ladder, achievement, power over somebody else versus with. Some of these we don't want at all, but some of these qualities aren't inherently bad. In fact, they're really necessary. A little bit of competition is good. Of course, we need structure. Money is not bad. Outward success is not bad. But when they become the only definition of success, something essential is left out, and that's feminine energy. Things like intuition, empathy, collaboration, creativity, relational intelligence. So these are equally necessary for sustainable success, but they don't map neatly onto traditional metrics like titles, productivity, or constant availability the way that the workforce is currently shaped. Now, at the same time, women have been expected both historically and today to be agreeable, likable, relational, right? So, from thinking from the earlier cultural scripts that define women's value in terms of being, the good wife or the pleasant company, to modern workplaces where women who are direct or ambitious might be labeled difficult or too much. And the expectation to be warm and likable has never really faded away. Research shows that women in leadership are penalized, actually, in performance reviews more often for their tone and personality than for their actual results. And I want to name here that for women in color, this is tenfold. So women enter the workplace then carrying these two conflicting or seemingly conflicting scripts, at least at face value. So script one is be ambitious, achieve, lead, compete, right? Get that gold star at all, whatever it takes, at all costs. Script two, though, is no, 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 be warm, agreeable, likable. And so what happens is that it can feel like striving for one violates the other, creating this constant tension. And so the results are we enter the workplace then with two yardsticks. Women at work measure themselves by that masculine definition of achievement and the expectation to be likable and agreeable at all times. Often feeling like if they succeed in one area, it feels like they're failing at the other in the same moment. The second thing this leads to is moving goalposts. So the definition of success is going to depend on who's judging. Is it your boss judging? Is it your team? Is it that daycare worker that you drop your kids off with? The third is this silenced inner voice that we can experience. Because when all of your energy goes out to these outer scripts, meaning these external definitions of how to achieve success, what happens is you can lose touch with your own actual skills, your actual competencies, and your innate talents because you're trying to fit into this impossible box of success that isn't even your definition of success. And here's where two major things might crop up. The first is burnout, which, as I've shared before, the root of burnout or chronic stress is a disconnection from self or innate personal power, and then imposter syndrome. So often we might feel like we can't bring our full selves to work. On one side, we tone ourselves down, right? We're less direct, less assertive, just to be seen as likable and not quote unquote bossy or angry. On the other side, we might stifle that feminine energy that maybe comes naturally to some of us, like empathy, collaboration, or relational awareness. Ironically, though, these very qualities are proven by research to be essential for effective leadership. But it's not playing out that way in the workplace quite yet in most places of work. But when we have to hide these parts of ourselves, right, whether it's our voice, our intuition, our empathy, or our directness, we feel less worthy, less authentic, and more disconnected from our true innate power. And this connection is breeding ground for imposter syndrome. And when imposter syndrome whispers, you don't belong here, you didn't earn this title, you're not good enough, perfectionism often becomes a survival strategy, right? We think, well, wait a second. If I can just be flawless, I'll prove myself, right? Maybe I can finally feel worthy. Maybe if I do this presentation excellently, maybe if I look the part, maybe if I say just the perfect thing, people will see that actually I am excellent at my job. Actually, I do belong in this position. I should have a seat at the table. So, in sum, if we aren't solid, really solid in our own strengths and our own definition of success, we can't win because the definition of success and how to attain it is just a moving target if we're looking outward. Of course, imposter syndrome is going to creep in. Of course, given all of this, right? And our social conditioning with all of this, it's inevitable. So it's really not about avoiding imposter syndrome. Everybody experiences it at some point or another, but it is about how we handle it when it crops up. And then, of course, this leads to our coping mechanisms, our survival strategies, which many develop perfectionism or people pleasing, because this helps us to survive in our mind. We are protecting ourselves in an environment with conflicting expectations. And so here's the point of all of this, why I'm sharing this, why with you up front. When you think about your own perfectionist or even people pleasing tendencies, I want you to feel less judgment and more compassion towards yourself now that you've had time to reflect on why this is. Because perfectionism really is not something to fix about yourself. That's actually the point. There is absolutely nothing wrong with you. But when it crops up, it is an indicator that there's some healing that needs to take place. It's an indicator that we are feeling unworthy or not enough in some way, shape, or form. And this is going to be the first step towards healing and allowing us to have that self compassion to do that healing work in. So, even right now, just take a moment and breathe. Breathe it in that there is really nothing to fix. You are already whole and amazing. So, we're going to get into specific strategies to heal perfectionism when it crops up in a bit. But first, I want to talk to you about identifying when perfectionism is creeping up for you and whether you tend towards perfectionistic patterns. Because, as with many things, just noticing it, bringing that awareness is half the battle. So, we've talked about why perfectionism shows up. Let's talk about how you know if you're slipping into it. What is important to know is that perfectionism actually usually starts from a healthy place. If you have some perfectionist tendencies, you also likely have a real commitment to excellence. You have high expectations and high standards for yourself, for the work you produce, for others. You have high accountability for yourself. You're going to do what you say you're going to do. You might have attention to detail. These are incredible. These are incredible qualities that you want to maintain, and they have likely fueled your success as a leader. But when excellence gets hijacked, right, by the belief that if I do everything flawlessly, then I'll finally be enough. I'll finally be admired and recognized and safe. That's when it tips into perfectionism. And instead of fueling you, it's going to start these patterns that drain you. So, here are some of the most common signals you may be in perfectionism mode. The first is over preparing. Oh my goodness, am I guilty at this? So, this looks like spending hours tweaking slides, emails, or lesson plans long past the point. This is the key where that extra effort is actually going to change the outcome. Right. This is when we're spiraling into, what image should I put on this PowerPoint? How should I position this? Or how exactly should I structure this meeting? What's the precise language of how to ask this question? And you keep iterating and tweaking. And this is coming from second guessing yourself. But you're also really zoomed in at this point and stuck in the details instead of focused on the larger point or the larger goal. The second is difficulty delegating. So, this is when you'd rather just not even bother and do it yourself to make sure it's done perfectly, even if it means taking on a couple extra hours of work and you know you're going to be working past hours to do so, or putting some of your responsibilities on the back burner for a moment while you take these things over. Now, this isn't just going to burn you out really fast, right? It also is taking away the opportunity from others, the person who should be doing this task. So going back to my example, when perfectionism was cropping up in my parenting, what I would do often is I wouldn't let my husband, if there was a meltdown, I would be the only one to handle it because I wanted it handled a certain way, right? I wanted it, quote unquote, by the book. And what was happening here is, of course, that was exhausting for me, right? Handling three kids' meltdowns, tell however many times it happened a day when they were super young. I was really robbing my husband of the opportunity to successfully calm one of my daughters down. And I was also robbing my daughter of the chance to see my husband as a trusted parent who can handle her emotions. And you can see how this would play out at work similarly, right? When it comes to skill development of someone you manage, stepping in and doing the task for them is not doing you any good, and it's not doing them any good either. The next piece is rigid standards. This is when you catch yourself thinking there is only one right way to do it, and it is my way. Whether it's how a project should be executed at work or how bedtime should go at home. Another is this harsh inner critic. So, your first instinct is to notice what's wrong with your performance rather than what went well. And these mistakes feel like huge failures instead of what they really are, which is simply feedback. And this often starts with ourselves, right? Just we do a presentation and what we remember is when we mess up those two times versus the incredible insight or aha moments that the people we were facilitating for had. But this can also trickle into management, right? Are we focused on the errors? Are we micromanaging moments versus really understanding and seeing, wow, this person delivered this and did so well? Procrastination is another one that is probably surprising. It's surprising to me that procrastination is actually a sign of perfectionism. But it's because what happens is we have an upcoming project or task in front of us, and we want to do it perfectly. And so it feels so daunting, right? We think, oh my gosh, I don't know if I'm ready. Am I ready enough? And we prepare, procrastinate until we feel totally ready, which means either A, it doesn't get done, or B, you're working late into the night because you started late and you're still trying to make it perfect. So the next is overfunctioning. At work, this looks like micromanaging or jumping in to fix others' mistakes. So it's similar to what I mentioned before about not delegating, but you're jumping in after it starts. So going back to my home example, it'd be like letting my husband begin to handle the meltdown, but as soon as I see it going sideways from my perspective, stepping in, right? If I don't know, like how he's handling it. So, similar to not delegating, this is not only going to burn you out, but it robs others of responsibility and growth. And then the final is, of course, the classic difficulty resting or turning off your mind. So, even when you're off the clock, your brain is spinning, right? That mental to do list, that email you should have written differently, that one thing you said that was wonky, or obsessing over that next project because it has to be flawless. And here's the deeper cost. Perfectionism keeps your brain stuck in what are high beta or stress waves. These are the same waves or energy as anxiety. So, going to back to the last episode, I had mentioned that we all emit a measurable energy that not only impacts us, but those around us. And when we're in these high incoherent beta waves of energy, that fight or flight mode might help us power through a deadline. But if it keeps going, it shuts down creativity and problem solving, the very innovation and presence that you want to bring as a leader to a project or to your team or as a parent. is going to get blocked. So the irony is this: perfectionism convinces you that you will be successful, but in reality, it burns you out, it stifles creativity, and it disconnects you from the people and the outcomes that matter the most. So, what can we do about this? Let's talk about how to heal this perfectionism. We don't fix perfectionism by throwing away its strengths. Remember that we don't want to get rid of excellence, of high expectations. We want to heal it at the root so that excellence doesn't tip into perfectionism and connection doesn't tip into people pleasing or self abandonment, as another example. And here's the truth: leadership in life is that this is an inside out job. Changing something external might give us temporary relief, right? A new job, a new system, or even a lighter season of life. And feeling safe to be yourself at work is definitely a real thing. So I'm not saying that changing jobs is not necessary at some times. It is, it might help, but it doesn't address the root, which is always going to be healing and returning to yourself and your worth. So you feel safe to be who you are. Unless we do that inner work, perfectionism simply follows us into the next role or the next project or the next chapter. And for me, perfectionism has definitely loosened its grip over time, but it's not like something you're going to check off the list, like, oh, done with perfectionism forever. It is, again, as I mentioned in my previous podcasts, it's kind of like carrying this heavy backpack of rocks. And each time you're able to notice that perfectionism is cropping up and releasing it, you're beginning to heal that pattern, and it takes a rock or a boulder out of that backpack, and your load will get lighter. That perfectionism will loosen its grip on you. And here's the piece I really want you to remember: you are already whole as you are. Healing perfectionism is not about fixing what is broken. There's nothing broken in you. It is about uncovering and integrating those parts of ourselves that got tangled up in these survival patterns so that more of your true selves, your true gifts and strengths and your leadership can shine through. So, here are three powerful strategies, and then I'm going to share a broader mindset shift that really, really has helped me. So, strategy number one is shifting from this concept that everything is a test or an opportunity to perform to really everything is just practice. Perfectionism says do it flawlessly or you failed. But the reality is, life is not a test. Life is to be lived, which means everything is simply practice. Everything is simply a chance to enjoy ourselves, be more of ourselves, and to grow. So, a child's tantrum, that is actually an opportunity to practice regulating your nervous system, not to perform and say the perfect things and be that perfect parent. And if you do blow up and things don't go well, another opportunity to practice repair with your child. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to raise my voice. I was stressed. Same with the team conflict, right? If there's a team conflict, here's an opportunity for you to practice grounded communication. What a gift. An awkward silence in a meeting, practice holding your own power. Right? When we treat life as practice, the pressure is going to lift off of us. When we stop trying to ace everything in the moment, instead of learning, we're going to actually master our energy. We're going to be operating from that alpha state of creativity and innovation. The second strategy is to zoom out and reconnect with the bigger why. So, perfectionism often pulls us into details and optics, right? Am I dressing the part? Is the format on this slide perfect? When in reality, neither of those things has anything to do with whether you or your team will meet your quarterly goals. So, zooming out to purpose or the greater goals is going to get you back into utilizing your time and focusing on what matters most, but more so, if you can zoom out to your why, your deep why. In education, it's not necessarily, for me, it wasn't necessarily about hitting my quarterly goals. It's because I believe education is the path to freedom and a choice filled life for children. And so connecting back to our purpose and what we're trying to do here is going to make us realize that that detail on that slide isn't it. We need to be spending our time doing different things to align ourselves. So, in leadership, when you're leading a team, this also means zooming out and anchoring your team in the bigger vision so that they don't drown them in the minutia. This is going to save so much time. And it's going to help you all meet your goals so much more efficiently and effectively. So, this means using numbers, using goals, tracking progress, and reminding everybody what matters the most. So, a fun thing to do here, and I dare you to do this, is to choose one thing today to half you know what. Put only 80% of effort into something small, right? A drafted agenda. Instead of making the perfect table with the perfect sequence, open up a Word document, drop a few bullets in there, and go. You're done. Your kids' lunches. Instead of making everything perfect and cutting it up, give them a sandwich. Try something that you can just not do your absolute best in, kind of do it partially, something that's inconsequential, and notice how much time and energy you have now for the things that really, truly matter. The third piece is shifting from perfectionism into what's called growth mindset. And this, Carol Dweck came up with this. A growth mindset is the belief that abilities are not fixed, that they can be developed through effort, feedback, and learning. And so, what this means is mistakes aren't proof of inadequacy, they're actually proof of learning. Think about that for a second. Think about how profound it would be for your perfectionism if, when you made a mistake, you realize, wait a second, this isn't me being inadequate. It is showing my progress. It is showing that I have learned something new. Challenges aren't threats, they're a chance to expand, and feedback isn't criticism. It is information for growth. And oh my goodness, how well you receive feedback, and then how well you are able to frame feedback, not as criticism for others, is a game changer in leadership. So, research shows that when we make an error, the brain immediately fires a signal called error related negativity, which basically just says, pay attention. Here's a chance to grow. And I used to share this along with an example about taxi drivers in London with my class at the beginning of the year, because this is so critical. So even taxi drivers in London show this truth. Their posterior hippocampus, which is the part responsible for spatial memory, is larger than average because of the constant navigation and learning that job requires. And so that demonstrates neuroplasticity, right? It demonstrates basically that when you work hard or try, you're going to learn. And in the classroom, this was critical because it started off with us realizing as a class, wait a second, nobody's dumber, no one's more intelligent. We are all equal. We don't have to compare to each other, because when we don't understand something, we can grow that part of our brains, right? We can learn. And in leadership, it's the same thing with adults, right? In leadership, this looks like continuous improvement and realizing we're never going to arrive. There is no such thing as being perfect or arriving. We're collecting data. We're seeing what's working. We're adjusting. This growth mindset ties us back into the practice principle that every moment is an opportunity to learn and to improve. And leading into this, I want to share an even more radical mindset shift around practice. So, a friend recently told me that she felt like she had failed a test from the universe, right? She had fallen just partially back into a pattern that she had thought she had already healed. And she joked, okay, maybe she didn't fail completely. Maybe she just got a C. But here's what we realized. If the universe or God or divine or whatever you want to call it is always on our side, which I firmly believe that the universe is on our side, then life is not about passing or failing tests at all. What if every experience is the exact experience that you need in that particular time to heal the next layer of yourself? That boss who triggers you just like your dad, that presentation that went sideways, That old pattern showing up again, maybe these aren't signs you failed. Maybe they're gifts or opportunities you've been given to heal what's left to heal and to come home to yourself just a little bit more each time. And when you see life this way, you realize nothing is about your worthiness. You were always worthy. Every moment is simply an invitation to return to who you already are. And then we can drop perfectionism, right? Because there simply isn't anything to prove. You can stop proving your way through life and start relaxing into it and enjoying it. So let's recap. Today, we talked about what perfectionism really is, not a flaw, but a strength of excellence distorted into a survival strategy. We talked about why it shows up for women, right? That double bind of ambition and likability, these shifting goalposts of what success is, depending on who you're looking at, and systemic gaps. And we've talked about how it can cost us, how it can cost you burnout, blocked creativity, disconnection from self in cultures of pressure or avoidance. But most importantly, we talked about how we're not here to fix, we're here to heal. And here are 3 strategies for healing it at its root: treating life as practice, not a test, zooming out to reconnect to your bigger why when you get bogged down in perfectionistic details, and adopting a growth mindset of continuous learning. And here's the invitation I want to leave you with. What if you stopped trying to ace every moment and instead saw each experience as an opportunity to heal? What if you zoomed out of the details and chose to lead from purpose? What if you welcomed mistakes not as evidence that you failed, but as proof that you're growing and becoming more of who you already are? That's how we heal perfectionism at the root. That is how we preserve excellence without burning out, connection without self abandonment, and leadership without losing our health or our soul. Not perfectionism, but practice. Not fixing, but healing. And not proving, but coming home to yourself. Thank you so much for being here. I hope that you got something of value out of today. And until next time, burn beautiful loves. Thank you for spending this time with me. If this episode sparked something in you, subscribe, and I'd be so grateful if you'd take a moment to rate and review the show. It is the most powerful way to help other women find it. And if you know someone who is struggling or on the edge of burnout or simply wants to lead from wholeness, send this their way. Let's grow this movement together. To get exclusive insights, tools, and behind-the-scenes support, join the HERS Insider List at www.leaduphealth.com. And if you're ready to explore working together, whether through coaching or consulting, you can book a free consultation right from the site. Until next time, burn beautiful loves.